natural law of physics almost.
Yeah, kind of the law of hand physics anyway.
Right.
You know, whatever book that was in. But that's kind of why I eventually got to that direction. To go in the other direction, sometimes I will for exercise. Anytime I do anything, I'll always exercise it backwards, forward, sideways, do it every conceivable way, even in ways that I normally wouldn't do it, just to exercise my muscles around so I'm not stuck in one particular pattern. So I'm going in this direction. The reason I'm not going back and forth like that is because the middle finger then works twice as much. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It works twice as much on each passage back and forth. Again, that is a good exercise to do, to learn back and forth. But I always tend to go in that direction. So therefore, if you're going to go in that direction with 3 fingers to do 4, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in other words, 1 starts on a different finger each time.
Exactly, it's alternation.
So it's, exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I start always, incidentally, with my ring finger. Some guys, I guess if you're going the other way, you would start with your index finger.
Would that be considered your heaviest attack finger?
Yeah. You know, I guess I would consider it that way. But so when I start with that finger, that's 1, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the next finger, the middle finger, begins 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that ends you up perfectly for your index finger to take the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's... So when you're getting real fast and stuff, you will hear 3 in there if you listen closely. But when I get my live calluses and stuff back, you probably won't. You know, it would be so loud you can't tell anyway. But that's kind of the trick of playing fast with 3. Now you can do with a lot of 2-finger techniques out there. Jeff Berlin plays 2-finger technique, unbelievable. I mean, the last thing he needs is another finger. You know, so but. With a 3, for me, it tends to be easier. You know, Iron Maiden, you know, that galloping kind of thing for heavy metal style stuff. It works good for that, you know, because that's all in 3s or groups of 3s. But some guys don't need it. But for me, I prefer the 3-finger technique. So, but there is plenty of valid 2 fingers that use. And when I do use 2 fingers, I usually use these 2 because
index and ring.
Yeah, because these 2 are actually the most even of the 2, or of the 5 here. Left a few out. And that's one thing I left out also. When you work from that joint, you even up the flatness. See, when you have your fingers like this finger sticks way out. As soon as you change them, you get a totally flat surface there, and it makes it easier so that one doesn't stick out over the other.
Right, now they're
so it's funny because of all this stuff you'd think, you know, I've spent years figuring this out and then did it, but in actual fact I did it for years without having a clue as to what it was. So it all kind of developed totally natural by feel, by what felt natural to me to play, what actually felt right when I was up on stage, when I wasn't thinking about, you know, what my fingers were doing. Is the last thing you would ever think about on stage. But it all came about from just playing over years and years and years. And then later on, like when I go now, like to Musicians Institute, and somebody asks me a question, I got to stop and think, and gee, how do I do that? So I've learned all this stuff after the fact, in other words. So the reason why I brought that up, I don't want you to think that I was, you know, figuring all this stuff out and then applying it, because I'm certainly nowhere near that smart. So
it came through practice, actual live experience.
Yeah, live. Practicing that I've done usually doesn't have too much to do with anything other than finger exercises. Live playing is where I've learned all my hammering techniques and everything. They're all thought up and done right on stage live, you know, which is kind of the best place, you know, trial by fire, more or less. So, yeah, that's about it for the right hand, I think. Oh, sometimes I use 4 fingers, but that little finger never gets a quite good enough callus on it, so it catches. So you'll hear it in there.
What about raking strings technique?
Yeah, that's another right-handed technique, and what that consists of basically of when you rake fingers across, similar to a garden rake, which is probably where they got the name from.
Exactly.
Actually, I didn't know what it was called until Tim Bogart, who I stole the idea from in my early days. Tim, well, and as well now, he's my total hero on bass, and he did tons of raking techniques. And when I first started bass and listened to him, I realized that I had to be a finger player, because there's no way you could do those on with a pick. Those sweeping techniques are popular now, and they're very close to it, but there's still a lot of things you can do raking that you can't do with a pick. So I stole it from Tim Bogart, so I had to give him credit for that. But it's basically a way to slip your fingers over the strings and get a whole bunch of notes out of just one pass because your fingers are staggered and they kind of catch at different times. So you get that. Now that particular move there, that's a 4-finger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you can really get some wailing, you know, a whole bunch of flailing notes coming out of there like that.
This seems like a good way to build right-hand speed.
Yeah, well, the speediest things I do are probably the raking stuff, you know, because there's just so many notes whip by. If I ever had to go back and transcribe or figure out what it was, I'm doomed, you know, because I don't even know what half the notes are that sneak by there. But that's definitely one of the secrets of getting a lot of speed out of the instrument if that's your goal, to be a speedy player. But it also adds a fluidity to your speed because things are flowing and raking and being pulled across in the same direction and stuff like that. And it makes speed for speed's sake is pointless, but if it's fluid and musical,
exactly, in context.
Yeah, which is where raking kind of comes in. It makes it a little bit more musical, more rhythmic. Stuff like that.
Would you say between the 3-finger technique, the raking, and then the 4-finger, you have your basic favorite right-hand patterns?
Yeah.
That you use 90% of the time?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The only other thing I do is the tapping stuff, which you know that's another story. But yeah, that's basically it. The most important thing for anybody, I think, is that locked, thumb locked, strap, length, you know, all those little crazy things that you would never think of.
All the little variables.
Yeah, locked in there, good spot, hands in the right position, playing with a lot of strength to get a really good, strong, hard, solid callus, because that'll have a lot to do with the tone of your playing. So however hard your fingertip is how easy it slips over the strings. I always have used Rotosound strings, and they're very rough strings. They're tough on the frets, but for tone, I can't